So I started my first business at 15 years old as a painter because every time I was in a detention center and I would drop an F-bomb, they'd make me paint. So I became a pretty good little painter, and so that's what I had experience in. Your product is only about 2% of the marketing. Let's call it 20% to be fair. The right of it is 80%. You can either learn from your own experience or from other people's experience. But I think anybody who tells you they're authority on AI is a mistake. Once your mind is shifted by a new idea, it never regains the same shape. But that's always been something that I've listened to.
And welcome back. My name is Daniel Sanchez, CEO and founder of Reekolect, and we're here in the Digital Legacy Podcast. And we have the exclusive opportunity of recording here at the Rice Estate on Turner Hill. And we have a very, very special guest with us today, which is Ford Saeks.
Ford,
thank you so much for joining us here today. How are you doing?
I'm excited. I love adding value.
Absolutely, and we really appreciate that. So, Ford, I'm going to go ahead and start off with a quick little bio just to kind of let the audience know a little bit about you, and then we can dive right in if that's okay.
Sure.
Phenomenal. So, quick bio here on Ford. So, world-renowned growth accelerator, Hall of Fame keynote speaker, help clients generate $1 billion in sales worldwide from startup Fortune 500 companies. Authority in AI business innovation, business operations, and customer experience. Featured on NBC News, CBS, Bloomberg, HuffPost Inc., 500 and Entrepreneur Magazine, and more, and founded 10-plus companies, author of 7 books, including Accelerate, Superpower, AI Mindshift, and U.S. patent holder. That summarizes.
Well, that's a lot, but yeah. But I always like to, every interview it's about the guest. But I appreciate the social proof.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Ford, let's dive in. I love with all your accolades, all your accomplishments that you've done. If you can take us back a bit, where it all started. Is there a one moment in time, early in stages of your growth, where you recognized that you had a certain mindset to become an entrepreneur, to do well in business, and evolve yourself?
Well, certainly. Growing up in the projects, in foster care and didn't have any real expertise. What I decided I would do is I'd try to figure out a way to earn money, Daniel, other than how everybody in my neighborhood in the north side of Minneapolis was earning money. So I started my first business at 15 years old as a painter because every time I was in a detention center and I would drop an F-bomb, they'd make me paint. So I became a pretty good little painter, and so that's what I had experience in. And so that first year as a painting company at 15 years old, I generated $35,000 in sales, which in today's equivalent is about $300,000. Wow. So not bad from a kid from the projects that started. Now, the problem was, what happens when you make $35,000 and you don't know how to manage it is I spent 36. But my first bug wasn't really mindset. I didn't know what those things were. I just knew I wanted to survive and make money differently. And I learned the valuable lesson of how to add value and how to really find and bridge the gap between where someone is and where they wanted to go.
Absolutely. Now, Ford, let me ask you a question. When you were going into, as you were growing up and you mentioned the neighborhoods that you came from, did you ever allow that in any way to shape your mind in the sense of that you weren't enough or that you couldn't accomplish enough? Or if you could walk us through that a little bit about how you coach
it was really about survival skills, right? I mean, when you don't have food to eat, you have to figure out how to add value. And that first year in business, I had 3 crews working for me, and their average age was 40 years old. Because I learned that painters like to do 2 things. They like to paint and they like to drink. And so I was found that if I went out and sold the jobs, which became natural for me, I was streetwise, but I really understand the human behavior and communications. And so I learned that as long as I deliver value, then people will exchange money. So whenever in my keynotes or presentations or high-end strategic consulting, I don't talk about money. It's always value. So I don't think, Daniel, that there's so much thing as a money problem. If you want to make more money, you have to add more value. And so I think a lot of, even as your listeners here, they're maybe asking the wrong question. And so the tip I would say is, if you're asking the wrong question, then the answer doesn't even matter. So start with what questions are you asking, and then you'll get better results.
Absolutely. And I think that's so important. I think that so many times you see businesses and brands really focus on the product and not really focusing on the audience about who their clients are going to be or potential customers and not providing that value, to your point. Is that similar with what you see with so many businesses, or what do you see as always the main issue when it comes to that?
I think it's really 2 things. One, your product is only about 2% of the marketing. Let's call it 20% to be fair. The rest of it's 80%. And so we've all seen great restaurants that have gone out of business that had really good food. And we've all seen crappy restaurants that are still in business. And every time you eat there, you're like, why am I eating there? This is not good food. Well, it comes down to marketing. So I'm going to share a super fast formula that everybody can use. Number one, what's your core message? What's the message? What's the benefit message? And benefits are things that are about you, that are emotional and intangible. If you're talking about your products, your services, or your people, or your process, those are features. So lead with benefits. So one character or one component is really the message. The second one is your ideal client. Are you sending that right message to the specific ideal client? So if you think about who's listening to this episode, are they an entrepreneur? Are they looking for strategic and tactical things that they can use to grow? And then the third variable of that component is the method. So you have your message, which is your benefits. How are you sending it to your market? And who is your ideal client? And so that formula can be used by anybody. If you've got any product or service or you work for an organization, those 3 M's can help you dramatically improve your return on investment and your return on engagement if you're doing social media.
Very powerful. Now, pivoting and going to another direction, Ford, let me ask you a question. As you were becoming successful and building your businesses and moving on with your career, I always discuss this, and I've discussed it with a lot of the professionals here that have been here today, discussing the element of having a mentor. Who is your mentor? And do you suggest that, or is that important to anyone that wants to thrive in business?
Well, just so everybody knows, we did not get these questions ahead of time, right? And so I would tell everybody out there that certainly mentors are important. You can either learn from your own experience or from other people's experience. And so those mentors can be people that are in books or in audios, on TED Talks, on YouTube. There's no shortage. So the real action step here is to create a success library. What do you have in your success library for the areas, the magic wheel of excellence, your operations, finance, marketing, sales? What resources do you have? Start with the resources and then look at the mastermind groups and things that you can use. And then what are the online courses or the master classes? And reaching out to those people. Many of the mentors that I had growing up were like Brian Tracy and Zig Ziglar and Tony Robbins, and I could name names till the cows come home. And what I found is they became clients of mine. So my mentors over time, I attracted them into my world, and I actually did work for people that I used to listen to their cassettes. I know that your audience might have to Google what a cassette is, but we'll call it a stream, all right? It was a digital stream. You definitely need mentors in your life. And so if you're struggling with something in your life, regardless of personal or professional, you shouldn't try to solve it yourself. Go out and get competent people, but just make sure the key word there is competent. Don't take advice from people who haven't done it or you haven't judged social proof.
Very powerful. I think that's a very powerful message there, looking for a mentor. Now, something else I'd like to touch on, Ford, regarding you're the authority on AI. Tell the audience why.
Well, I would say this. I appreciate that, but I think anybody who tells you they're authority on AI is a mistake. The more I've learned, the more I know I don't know. So I want to make sure that everybody listens. If anybody claims to be an expert on AI, run the other direction, because they're probably delusional. And so while I learned a lot and I know a lot and I look at AI through the lens of business. That's it. So is this going to help me expand my influence? Is it going to help me make better decisions? Is it going to help me get leads? Is it going to help me improve the customer experience? And is it going to increase operational efficiency? So the lens that you should be looking through is open-minded, critical thinker, and coachable. So yes, you want to search out experts, and certainly I consider myself an expert on the topic, but I'm very clear to let people know that you can never know enough. This space is changing so rapidly, and that's why I wrote the book AI Mind Shift, because it wasn't about the bells and whistles or what new technology, the large language model. It wasn't about the technology. In fact, I would tell your listeners, do not get seduced by the technology. Think about AI as a feature, not a product. Think about it as a tool, not an end result.
Absolutely. Now, our audience also has a lot of concerns about how AI, some believe that it will be, again, taking over jobs and whatnot, but for those that really do want to be at the forefront of AI, where would you tell them? In other words, what would you recommend for them to start when it comes to that? Because you just mentioned it could be leveraged as a tool. So would you recommend for them to focus on what their passion is and see how AI can be integrated, or how should they approach AI if they want to involve it in this?
First of all, training isn't something you did, it's something you do. So I would encourage all your organizations to get training, get consistent training, and make it part of your culture. You definitely want to make sure that you have acceptable use policies. If you run an organization or you're in an organization, make sure you have the do's and don'ts of what's allowed and what's not. Obviously, you know, AI is super smart, and yes, it'll probably take over the world. People ask me, is it going to replace humans? And I say, no, it's going to replace humans that aren't using AI, right? And so there are systems and tools that you can use. I've got free resources at profitrichresults.com/AI-training. There's nothing to buy. You can go there. You can get a 90-minute video on AI plus a bunch of downloads and some resources. So regardless whether you feel yourself as a beginner or already an early adapter, or maybe you think you're a rock star top producer, you can get resources on how to shift that mindset for you and your culture.
It's very powerful. Ford, last question in closing here. When we're talking about legacy, how do you want to be remembered 50 years from now?
Well, I think making an impact. You know, the mentors that I've had over my life that I was able to, you know, you say once your mind is shifted by a new idea, it never regains the same shape. I don't take credit for that quote, by the way, but that's always been something that I've listened to. So I think that if I can add value, I'm programmed, Daniel, how do I add value and make a profit? I think, and people will say to me, well, it's not all about the money. Well, if you want to make a better impact, make more money and be a philanthropist and give it away. But you have to reach more people. So my legacy really is in the resources I've created, the books, the training, and the people's lives that I've impacted, speaking to hundreds of thousands of people each year as an opening keynote speaker and as a high-end strategic consultant to help them bridge that gap, because everybody has this gap between where they are and where they want to go.
Ford, thank you so much. Truly appreciate you coming onto the podcast. It's been an absolutely phenomenal experience, and thank you so much again, and really appreciate that.
So where can listeners find out more about the upcoming episodes, Daniel?
Well, they can definitely go to YouTube at Reekolect, and that's where you'll find all the episodes that we'll be loading here at the Rice Estate.
Now, I wouldn't be a good marketer if I didn't do that. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.